And I believe in miracles because I believe in God. Why don't you start believing in miracles? It's so easy, it's so simple, it's so exciting, it's so thrilling when God performs a miracle for you, and He'll do it. You see, one thing I know, and that is the fact that if you are a part of humanity, there will be troubles, there'll be sorrows, frustrations, heartbreak. And you need a power greater than yourself to meet these problems. And underneath all of the uncertainties of life, there is God. And the only limit to His power lies within you. Start believing Him for miracles in your own life. Come meet my guest. Mrs. Bennett, I want you to know that I sincerely appreciate the fact that you took the time today out of your busy life to come and make this telecast, because I know what a busy lady you are, and I also know that you have to rush back to school. Not that you're still going to school, but because of your executive position. It's a busy life you lead.
Yes, Miss Kuhlman, being assistant principal of Lusinger High School and dean of the fine arts there, I do have many demands on my time and energies. I must say, though, that I enjoy it. I've been there for the past 20 years. In fact, I've worked with young people all my adult life.
All right, may I ask you, because you are a very experienced lady with young people, and sometimes I think that there are literally hundreds of people who feel that they're well versed on the subject regarding the young people today who've never really dealt with young people. And you have to be very close to a situation to really understand the situation. Now, all of your adult life, as you say, you have spent with young people. Have you seen a change in these young people during the past 20 years?
Yes, I have. They still have the same emotional hang-ups, but it seems as though in this year, at this age of frustration, they are more, and it seems to me that the bulk of our young people today are over-anxious and frustrated because of the world conditions, but yet only the very small percentage are the ones that you read about that will not accept any kind of discipline and are making the headlines today. That's only a small fraction of the youth today.
I believe that.
I do feel, though, that there is an imbalance that perhaps wasn't quite so evident in years past in the love and discipline in the home. I think many parents are not aware of the fact that discipline and love must go hand in hand. Both are necessary. And perhaps this brought back into balance would be one of the things that might help the youth more than anything today.
So if one would just very candidly ask you your personal opinion as to what the answer is for the youth today, it would all be summed up in just what you've said.
A balance in love and discipline. They both must go hand in hand. And then I think, too, the family and the church together could strengthen the Christian background of and foundation for the youth, because they do need something to hang on to, and Christ is the answer. And our families and our church must get this through to the students, to the youth.
I believe that with all of my heart. And you know the reality of the power of God in your own life.
Yes, Miss Kuhlman, I certainly do. I know it through a miracle, a miraculous healing.
That happened to you?
Right, a disease that was called medically incurable, scleroderma, that I suffered with for over 11 years.
And they do consider it an incurable disease.
Yes, they do.
And what does it affect?
It affects the skin coverings of skin tissues of the body. And at the time the prognosis or the diagnosis was made, it had attacked the vital organs of my body, the heart, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, to the extent that the prognosis after 7 specialists, an internist, and had done many x-rays and tests, including biopsies, indicated that it had attacked the vital organs to the point where the prognosis was 3 years if I lived to improve enough to leave the hospital. They said I could not live longer than 3 years due to the damage that had already occurred to the vital organs.
And you had some of the very finest specialists.
Yes, I did. I had a team of 7 specialists besides highly recognized internists in the area.
Is there any evidence that this disease has ever been cured?
Medically, no. My husband contacted Mayo's after I had been in 4 different hospitals, and I was in and out of the hospitals and with stays as long as 4 and 5 months at a time during those 11 years. He contacted Mayo Clinic, and they advised him to remain with our own doctor and follow his instructions.
Well, what was the great miracle that took place in your life? Now, remember, you're a very sensible, rational person. You could not have held this marvelous position that you've held for over 20 years, a very responsible person. And so when you talk about God performing a miracle,
Yes.
you know what you're talking about, because that miracle happened to you.
That's right. That's right. I am a Baptist, and I was not taught that divine healing extended beyond biblical days. So when a Lutheran friend contacted me after I had been brought out of the hospital in 1965, just before Christmas, with the information that I should get my papers in order, that there was no more that could be done, that as the disease progressed, they would increase my medications. And at that time, I was on 53 pills a day and an injection every day or 2 every other day. So with that kind of news, I was facing Christmas vacation, and the Lutheran friend called and said, I have a book I'd like to bring by and have you read. And this book was entitled I Believe in Miracles by Kathryn Kuhlman. Now, I hadn't heard of Kathryn Kuhlman, nor had I at that time heard of the book. But she brought it by, and I accepted it. At the time, my husband was in bed with the flu, and so he read it first. And after he had read a while, he said, you know, this may be our answer. So I read it, and then we read and compared it with the miracles in the Bible, and we began to get quite interested. Now, divine healing was far from our belief at that time. But we thought, well, we've given medical science a good try, so why not? So later then, we learned that you were going to come to the Shrine Auditorium, January 23rd. So January the 23rd, we found ourselves waiting out front of the Shrine Auditorium with hundreds of other people waiting to get into
Never having
miracle
seen
service.
a miracle in your life.
Never.
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 You had never even read about miracles
Right.
until you read the book, I Believe in Miracles.
Right.
And all of this was contrary to your theology.
Right. And before we left our home to go to the service, my husband said, now, how will this change our lives? The disease I had required me to live by the beach. I couldn't be out in the sun. I couldn't even take a hot bath. I had to take cold baths. My legs had to be packed in ice. So he said, how will this change our lives? And we discussed it a while, and he said, well, we could live anywhere, couldn't
Now,
we?
that was a strange question.
Right.
Evidently, in even the question, there was confidence that God was going to perform a miracle for you.
Right. Yet, when we were in the service, we still were skeptical enough that we didn't really enter into the service until it was
Did you
nearly
not?
over. No, we didn't.
Tell me, you stood on the outside of the shrine waiting for the doors to open.
Right.
That in itself was unusual for you to stand on the outside of a place of worship, waiting to get in.
Well, even more humiliating, I had to sit on a camp stool because I was too sick to stand. So my husband and the 3 friends that we took with us made a circle around me so I wouldn't be crushed. But our camp stool was crushed in the push to get into the shrine when the doors did open. But in the meeting, about halfway through the meeting, we began to think, well, maybe there is something to this, because when we were waiting out front, there was a foreign-born lady waiting near us, and she was having such difficulty breathing that she was just gasping and making a lot of noise breathing. And she happened to get pushed into the auditorium and seated next to my husband on the left. And about halfway through the service, she received a healing. All this noise stopped. She was breathing normally, and she stood up and she said, "My God, I can breathe." And she was just praising the Lord.
And you saw all of this?
I saw all of this. And I had never been in a service where anybody spoke out or showed any sign of emotion before in my life. And when this happened, we thought, well, there must be something to this.
Sure, when you see it with your own eyes.
Right.
You have to accept it. You have to believe. And there was such freedom in the service.
Oh, yes, it was beautiful. Just
Did you like it?
Oh, it was beautiful. The music was lovely, everything. There was such a warmth and freedom, yes. So as the meeting progressed then, I remember saying to myself, even yet, if I could just be healed here in my seat and nobody know it. This was pride.
Your pride having to sit on a camp stool before the doors were open.
Right.
Naurine Bennett sitting on a camp stool. And then your pride, you want to be healed without having anyone
to know it.
Yeah.
So I looked at my watch and I thought, well, now, if there really is anything to this, a service will soon end. Am I going to be passed by? These thoughts were going through my mind. And then just about that time you said, the Holy Spirit is so at work in here that regardless of what your need is, if you just reach up and take it, it will be met. And for some reason, just as you said that, my arms went upward and my face turned up, and I said, "Dear God, if there is something to this, don't pass me by."
Just as simple as that.
And just as simple as that, and it was like a bolt of electricity hit me in the top of the head, and I started shaking. I couldn't stop shaking. My head went down to my knees, and I was just shaking as hard as I could shake. And my husband put his arm around my shoulder, and he said, "Honey, what happened? Did you faint?" I said, "I don't know what happened, but the pain's all gone." And Miss Kuhlman, for almost 12 years, I had never been without pain. Day or night, they couldn't stop the pain. And the pain was gone. Completely
and it was
gone.
instantaneous.
Instantaneous. And you came, there was a long line of people on each side, at each mic on the stage, and you came away to the center mic and you said, "I must get that woman. There's a woman in the center section that has just been healed of a rare skin disease. Where are you? Stand up, take your healing, accept it." And I thought you were calling for me, but yet I couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't lift my head up. And you said this 4 times. You came back to the mic and you said this 4 times before I could stand up. And my husband and an usher, whom we later found out was an elder in the Hollywood Presbyterian Church, came in, and the 2 of them helped get me out of the aisle and up to the stage.
And you didn't want anyone to see you?
I didn't want anyone to see me. And there I was on a stage at the Shrine Auditorium, 7,000 people looking, and I didn't care. I was telling them all how marvelous God is. And I've been telling them ever since.
Describe the sensation at the moment that you were healed. And it came so suddenly.
It came
when you raised your hands.
The moment I raised my hands and looked up, it was just as a bolt of electricity went through my body, and I was shaking as hard as I could shake. Just no person can shake themselves that hard, and that continued until after you have 4 times called out from the mic. You left the mic, you went away and helped others on stage and came back 4 times. Finally, you said, I've got to get that woman. Stand up and accept your healing. And I was able to be helped on my feet after you had said it the 4th time. But this shaking continued, and my legs were just weak and wobbly, just as though I were drunk. And as they took me up the aisle, my legs were dragging. The 2 men were holding me by the shoulders.
Well, how did you know you'd been healed?
I knew it. There was no doubt in my mind. The pain all left. I just knew it. I can't say how I knew it, but I knew it. I had no doubt whatever. In fact, I was so certain. Before I came to the service that morning, I took my regular dosage of 17 pills that morning. At 10:30, I was to take more. For some reason, I decided I wouldn't take those when I was waiting out front, and I didn't take them. At 12 o'clock, I was to take more. I didn't take them. And after I was healed, I never did take another pill. I just threw them all out. And I was on massive doses of cortisone. And you cannot stop massive doses of cortisone without going into shock. And I never hesitated. And I knew this. I knew because many times I'd been rushed into the hospital in shock because the cortisone, the synthetic cortisones I was on had lost effectiveness. So that I'd go into shock and be rushed into the hospital. This had happened many times over the almost 12 years. And I knew this, but I knew I was healed. I knew so definitely that never entered my mind.
Did you go back to your doctors?
I went back to my doctor. I called my doctor, and over the last several years, I had called him frequently and tried to get some encouragement, and he would humor me by putting me through the clinic, thinking maybe that there might be something he would find to encourage me. So I called him about a week later after the healing and asked for an appointment. And his nurse set up an appointment, and then later she called back and she said, no, Mrs. Bennett, don't come to the office, go to the clinic. He's going to call all the tests and x-rays he wants into the clinic. So he did that, and I went to the clinic on a Saturday and was there quite a portion of the day. Then I came away, and she had told me on the phone that when the tests were all in, he would give me an appointment. So when the tests came in, he called, and it happened to be Washington's birthday. Now, I was healed January 23rd. So Washington's birthday, school holiday, I went to his office, and I said to my husband, now, I don't know, how am I going to tell him? He's a doctor, a medical man, and I know I'm healed. How am I going to tell him? He said, well, I'll take off work and go with you, and I'll help you tell him, or I'll tell him. So after he had examined me, he got my lab folder, and he sat back on a high stool, and he said, now, Mrs. Bennett, tell me what happened. And I said, what do you mean, doctor? And always before, when he would examine me, my skin was so sensitive that the tears would just roll. Well, none of this had happened during the whole examination. And then, too, he had all the lab tests. So he opened up the folder, and he said, now, in the 15 years I've been your family doctor, and in the 12 years that almost that I've been doctoring you for this disease, he said, you, in this 12 years, have not had a lab test come back normal. And he said, and he flipped through pink slip after pink slip from the lab, and he said, every one of these tests are normal. He said, as I examined your body, I don't find any symptom of the disease in your body. Tell me what happened. So I said, do you believe in miracles? And he said, well, yes, I do. He said, I couldn't be a surgeon and a physician and not believe in miracles. He said, I know I have no healing power. God does the healing. I can do the surgery, but I have to wait for the healing. So I said, well, it was a miracle. And I told him. And he said, now, what did you say the title of this book was? And I told him. He said, and who was the author? And I told him. He wrote it right in my record. And he said, now, I'm going to get a copy of the book. He said, would you like a copy? And I said, well, I surely would. I have a loan copy, and they're very hard to get. So he ordered a copy of the book and called me his nurse called me when it came in. And he said, I can't explain it. He said, just don't try to explain it, accept it, and live a normal life. And it's been over 4 years. And I've lived a normal life.
Believe in miracles. Why don't you believe in a miracle? It's God. Kathryn Kuhlman had nothing to do with this wonderful healing. I promise you. I give you my word, I had nothing to do with this healing. You've just heard what God did for one woman and what God did for Naurine Bennett. He'll do for you if you'll only believe him. From this moment on, begin expecting a miracle from